Honestly,
showed up. About a month later, when I came home from working, I would find her in her house, yelling at me to come back, or I'd find writing on my walls that would say, "Come back, or I'll kill you." The writing eventually went from pencil to marker, and then her own fucking blood. And Jess, I'm being serious when I said blood. That bitch carved my name a bunch of times into her arms and legs. She only got into my house because I forgot to take the house key back from her at the time. In hindsight, I'm such an idiot. I know. That psycho knew where my parents lived and showed up to their house during the night. My mom almost had a heart attack when she woke up to the sound of a knife being tapped on the window glass. When she woke up, she saw Amanda standing there, staring at her, while psychotically smiling at her. Amanda did a lot, which really pissed me off, so one night, I decided to stay overnight at my parents' house. It was about 2 in the morning when I heard a tapping noise in the window next to me. I turned and saw Amanda staring right at me. Her eyes were wide open and red. She had bags in her eyes and a huge smile. I went outside and started yelling at her to stay away from me and my family, but she screamed at the top of her lungs and charged at me with a knife. I punched her right in the face, which knocked her out. I called the cops and made sure Amanda didn't wake up while they were arriving. The cops came quickly while Amanda was knocked out. They found my house key on her, and she was arrested and eventually sentenced for a long while. After Amanda was sentenced, my parents and I moved out of state because we'd like to stay as far away from Amanda as we possibly can, because she will eventually be released.
This happened to me at the beginning of this year, just after I lost my husband to meningitis. I had moved in with my father and taken a job at a local hotel. It was a nice, cushy job that wasn't very stressful, and it was also nice to me in my grief-stricken state. The job was the night shift front desk manager position. So I was watching scary movies or listening to creepy podcasts that seemed to help keep me awake. My husband had never liked scary things like I did, so it was nice getting back to something that was mine. Being the night worker, I was always by myself during my shift. The hotel was new, so it wasn't creepy to be by myself, especially since there was always someone around as far as guests went, and on top of that, my boss was always a phone call away. I knew I'd have backup if needed. Anyway, it was a night like any other. I was in the back office behind the desk, watching the cameras and listening to a podcast while twirling a pen around, waiting for hours to tick away. The hotel was pretty empty, so I felt more alone than usual. I looked down at my phone as my podcast ended and went to pick another one when I noticed movement outside the building on the cameras. A guest was walking in. I hadn't seen a car pull in from the driveway camera, but I chalked it up to me just not paying attention and went to the desk. The man walked in and I quickly noticed his clothes were dirty, tattered, and that he had this odd smell to him. Metallic smelling. I shook off the weird feeling and looked up at his face before greeting him. And I noticed that his eyes weren't on me, but the wall behind, just above me. I followed his gaze, wondering what he could be looking at, but there wasn't anything there. I was confused, but thought maybe he was lost in thought. I greeted him again, but his gaze still remained on the wall. I was starting to get freaked out, but kept my cool and cleared my throat. Sir, is there something I can help you with? I asked more firmly. Quickly, his eyes flicked down and his eyes were wide and crazy looking. It startled me enough that I took a small step back. His previously blank expression grew into that of a crazed, wide smile. He was missing teeth, and the second his lips parted, I could smell his rotten breath. It made my stomach churn. Before I could open my mouth, I watched his eyes slowly creep up and down my body, as if he were undressing me with his eyes. Then his eyes moved to my hand, and his smile faded into a hate-filled glare. His eyes were on my wedding ring. Well, yes, I still wore it as I wasn't ready to give it up yet. What the heck is that? He asked, his voice thick and gruff and full of anger. My wedding ring, sir. I'm married, I said, thinking maybe he was drunk. His glare got worse as his eyes met mine again. Married? You lying bitch! You never told me you were married! You lied to me! Sir, I don't know what you're talking about, and I'm afraid that I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I was so scared at that moment, but tried desperately not to cry. He was still shouting at me. So, you're kicking me out of my own home? You're a little hussy. I'm taking what's owed to me. Get over here. He reached across the counter to try and grab me, and I let out a scream, stumbled back, tripping over my long skirt. I crawled quickly for the office door as he rushed to the counter. He grabbed my shirt, tearing it down the back as I went to slam the door shut, and I slammed it on his hand, making him scream in pain as I heard the bones break. As he let me go, I managed to finally shut and lock it before going into my boss's office. And as I dialed 911, I could hear him screaming at the office door, kicking as hard as he could to get it open. The operator stayed on the phone with me until the cops arrived. It took 3 grown officers and a taser gun to take him down and get him in the car. When everything was safe, I was sat down for a statement, and my boss and father were called. As my father was getting me into his truck, I heard an officer say that the man was a highly wanted man from Florida who had escaped a psychiatric facility. After he escaped the facility, he went looking for young brunette girls who were heavyset like me, or rather like his late wife. He had killed her and cut out her eyes and breasts, and done the same to 2 other girls in Alabama, so I could only guess he planned to do the same to me. Thank God for strong deadbolts and all of the police officers. I used to work at a call center company, and my shift started at 11 p.m. Since training, I'd heard a lot of ghost stories about our building. Of course, I didn't believe them, and I really wouldn't have cared anyway, because all I cared about was work. One night, I went on a short break to go to the comfort room. Our office is located at the left corner of the building, and usually it's quite dark compared to the other office corners. I normally use the comfort room in the middle of our building because it's bigger and a lot of people go there. But since it was just a short break, I chose to use the executive's comfort room because it was much closer. Besides, it was always clean and looked a lot nicer compared to the other ones. When you enter the comfort room, the first thing you see on your right side are 2 sinks, a large mirror, and 2 lights above them. Then there are 3 cubicles on the right side and 2 cubicles on the left side of the room. When I entered, I noticed that the room was a little bit darker than usual. Some of the lights were not on, and only the cubicle in the corner on the right side had paper left, so I entered that one. When I was sitting at the toilet, I heard someone come in and enter the cubicle next to mine. And then I heard a woman crying. I tried to ask if she was okay, but she just kept crying. As I finished my business and stood up, the crying suddenly stopped. Concerned, I stood outside the door of the middle cubicle, looked slightly and asked again if she was okay, but there was still no answer. I tried peeking under the cubicle door, but no one was in there. But I could have sworn I heard someone come in earlier. I felt a bit spooked as I remembered the ghost stories that my coworkers used to tell about our building. I started walking fast to the exit, but somehow the doorknob that was fine when I'd entered was now broken, and I couldn't get the door to open. I was getting actually scared. The crying began again. I started banging on the door, shaking the doorknob. There was no use. And then the sound of the woman crying started getting closer. Panicking, I also started crying while banging desperately on the door. The crying stopped. I could
feel the woman standing right behind me. One of the lights in the ceiling started flickering, and the door still wouldn't open. I tried to avoid looking back in fear of what I might see, but from the corner of my eye, I saw in the mirror a reflection of a woman in the flickering light. She wasn't standing at my back. Half of her face was visible in one of the cubicle doorways. I closed my eyes. I was soaked in cold sweat. I remember shaking from fear, thinking I was going to die. I started praying as I cried. Only a minute or two, though it felt much longer, passed before the door suddenly opened and a maintenance lady stepped in. I was so relieved. I told her about what had happened, but she just apologized for the broken doorknob and ignored everything I said about the crying woman. I went straight to the office and apologized to my supervisor for coming back late from my break. I tried to tell her about what happened and told her that I was not feeling well, that I didn't think I could finish my shift that night. She didn't seem to believe my story. I warned my coworkers as well and told them about my scary toilet trip. I never went back to that comfort room ever again, and eventually left my job a few months later.
It was in 6th grade in junior high school. I remember this one specific day when there was a thunderstorm. I was heading to gym, where the gym teacher greets each student outside of the girls' locker room as usual. I went inside the locker room. I was getting ready to change into my gym clothes as usual, and I noticed at the corner of my eye, a shadow was walking past at the other side of the lockers. I looked and said, "Is anybody here?" There was no answer, so I took my gym clothes with me and thought stupidly that I should follow where the shadow was heading. I went to the back of the lockers where the shower room was. I opened every curtain from each shower booth except the one in the last. All of a sudden, the light that was illuminating in the back started to blink. I don't know where my courage came from, but I decided to open the last curtain in the back. And when I did, there was nothing. I turned around, but then I heard someone crying in the shower booth. So I opened the other curtain again quickly. "I know what you're talking about. You're lucky that you didn't see anything." Then she said when she was working late one day, she saw a body floating in the swimming pool, which is close to the gym. She thought it was one of the students, so she tried to save that person. When I tried to get to her, it was completely gone, she said. And then she told me there was the ghost of the girl who drowned a few years back. This girl was pregnant and she gave birth in the shower booth. She didn't want it, so she killed the baby by breaking its neck. Later on, she regretted what she did, so she drowned herself in the swimming pool. When I heard the whole story from my teacher, I felt a little bit sad. After that, I didn't see or hear anything, but I'm still wondering what was the shadow I saw in the locker room. And sometimes it still gives me goosebumps when I think about it, especially the crying of the baby and the bone-cracking noise. If the gym teacher did not come along, would I have seen that ghost of a girl holding the baby? Well, other than that, I just feel grateful that I didn't see anything that would shock me for my whole life.
So before getting into the story itself, I want to give some backstory on something that happened when I was around the age of 9. I grew up in a village called Hotlax in the northern parts of Sweden. The road leading from my school to my home was a long one, where the local authorities had to put up lamps which emitted a very dim blue light. I always felt like a nervous wreck when I had to walk to and from my school, both because even with the lamps, the road was very dark, and also because I was
asses on the floor. Other than that, it was ghost quiet, except for the heavy rain. I sat back on the cheap recliner chair,
I guess it's time to go home. Yep. Good night. Good night. Wait, it's time to get up. Okay, I'm up. Guess let's go to
Is to get the honour of using. While adjusting my band-aid, I listened to the television mounted on the corner of the ceiling as it broadcasted a seemingly important message.
Authorities say the woman was last seen on Cedar Avenue.
I looked up to see if the television was showing any images of this strange woman. No. It was yet another crazy person with no name and no face who we were supposed to look out for. Not creepy at all.
Authorities also say the woman was reportedly walking around and asking people very, very bizarre questions.
I focused back on my desk and continued working, but I still listened as the news anchor went on and on. She continued.
The following statement was issued by an unidentified government official.
Listen carefully, folks. Whatever she asks you, answer no. Do not, under any circumstances, answer yes.
Officials won't comment further as to why, citing security clearance. These are asking that you immediately call 911 if you deem anyone suspicious.
I thought that part of the coverage was quite odd, but I wasn't sure anything could scare me anymore. Working here at the hospital, I thought I'd seen it all. At the flash of the ruby red ambulance lights, I've seen people come in with severed arms, legs, fingers, people who somehow managed to scoop out their eyes, failed suicide attempts, and much, much more. You get used to it. My head was practically sunk into my desk as I filled out paperwork. That's when I heard something very subtle initially. I heard it coming from the front doors, the entrance. The automatic doors opened and closed, slamming against each other and sounding an obnoxiously loud thud each time. The very dim lighting I had surrounding my desk flickered incessantly. Hello? I called out, seated behind the safety of my desk. Only the whistling wind responded. Hello? I called out again. I felt obligated to check if someone was there, especially since it might have been someone who was injured and needed our attention. I reluctantly picked myself up from my chair and walked over to inspect. I nearly slipped and cracked my head open as the entrance floor was almost flooded from the rain. I noticed footsteps, wet shoe marks that seemed to come inside the hospital and then back out. I stood near the doors, poking my head outside, and looked. All I heard was the distant sounds of sirens and honking cars. The rain poured harder. The peace and quiet was disturbed within moments of me sitting back down. The automatic doors started again, opening and closing, slamming shut and letting in more rain as they did. But this time, I heard gentle footsteps make their way towards me, tapping closer and closer. Someone slowly emerged from the darkness between the entrance and front desk. A woman with drenched black hair approached, wearing a dark brown raincoat and a pair of boots that were too large for her toothpick legs. Her face was inundated with wrinkles and wet makeup. Her black eyeshadow smudged. Despite the heavy rain outside, she didn't seem to have bothered wearing her hoodie. Hello, how can I help you, ma'am? She didn't respond. She looked around, scanning and observing an unimpressive hospital. Is there something I can help you with? Still nothing. We engaged in a brief stare down, which she won. I looked down and pretended to gather important paperwork. Are you here to visit someone? Then finally, she responded, without talking. She simply nodded and then took a few steps forward, her hands hanging down her side. Her posture was unnatural, almost uncomfortable. Okay, for now I need you to sign here, then you'll have to wait a few hours for visiting time to begin, I said, pushing forward a sheet of paper and a pen. She raised her arm to sign and then abruptly stopped. She seemed startled by something on the desk. She looked at me, tilted her head, and, with a smile that was as wide as her eyes, said, "Would you please move that for me?" I was confused at first, and then she pointed at it with her index finger. As drops of rainwater tapped against my desk while her arm hovered over it. I took the little crucifix we had at the front desk and put it in a drawer. The woman proceeded as if she was going to finally sign the paper and then stop before writing anything. She dropped the pen on the ground and stood there again, staring at me. She asked me a question.
Do you reject the Trinity?
I'm sorry, I replied. For a few more uncomfortable moments, the woman stood there like an ancient statue. I had no idea what she meant by the question. Who exactly are you here to see? Family? Friend? What's your relationship with the patient? Before I could finish talking midway through my question, the woman turned around and walked out the door, still smiling and her eyes as wide as I'd ever seen on a person. I went back to work and tried to move on, but her creepy mannerisms were trapped in my mind throughout the night. At around 4 a.m. I spotted one of the children in our hospital walking down the hall. Nina, is that you? I called out. All the kids in the hospital knew me. I was proudly considered one of the cooler employees. I let them break the rules. I brought them snacks upstairs and even told them scary stories, despite their predictable regret later on. The nurses would get angry with me every time I held one of my scary story nights. They always had a bunch of bed sheets to change the next morning. I only did these things for the kids when I wasn't busy, when it was a quiet night, and this is one of those uneventful nights, which of course was a good thing. Anyway, it was very odd to see Nina awake at that time, walking down those shadowy halls. She was absolutely terrified of the dark, and yet there she was. Nina, is that you? I squinted my eyes as I walked towards her.
Sorry, Matt.
She began.
I don't want to be there anymore.
She had dragged her blue blanket along with her, which was her way of gesturing to us that she wanted to move to another room. You have a kid bothering you again? I asked. I took hold of her hand and began walking her back to the elevator.
Matt, please, don't make me go back up there. I don't like the new nurse.
I stopped walking. What? I said, kneeling to Nina's level.
She keeps asking us the same question over and over. I said no so many times. I keep telling her no, but everyone else kept laughing with her and saying yes to her. Please, I don't want to go back up.
Nina's words immediately played flashbacks inside my tired, overworked mind. Something about a strange woman going around and asking me even stranger questions. I didn't pay enough attention to that broadcast to notice the woman, but even if I had, I thought she had left the hospital. I ditched the elevator and ran up a flight of daunting stairs, stomping against each step with all the force I could muster. I probably woke up all those sleeping employees. I was so loud. I opened the doors to the children's room and couldn't believe my eyes. I checked each room, each one on each floor. I woke up my co-worker nurse and asked about the children. She couldn't find them either. We looked everywhere and put the hospital on lockdown. We set off all possible alarms and other emergency procedures. We didn't find them. All that was left behind were their clothes.
It happened on a Friday night. When I came home from work, I texted my friends and told them to grab a drink with me, but they didn't feel like doing anything this weekend. I'm 24, and all my friends started working too, so I understand that they wanted to stay at home, be cozy, and just relax. I was home alone at the time, sitting all by myself, and then something just came to my mind. I just wanted to drive somewhere. So I got in the car again and drove for a while. Then I tried to find a spot to park.
Morning, shopkeep. Looking good today.
Welcome to my store.
There was an underground parking lot that was placed in a one-way street. It was around 11:30 p.m. Even though it was a big city, there wasn't much activity around this area. After smoking, I walked back to the parking lot through the dark, small streets. But I was getting anxious and thought to myself, what if someone is following me? I'm out here all alone. So I turned up the pace and reached the parking lot. There was nobody at the parking lot, so I was relieved. But at that very moment, someone behind me shouted loudly. I got the chills and the hairs on the back of my head stood up. I slowly turned around, and there was this huge guy in a hoodie. He came to me and started talking. He was talking about how he just came out of prison, and that his wife changed the locks on the doors. I noticed that his right hand was in the pocket of his hoodie. I swear I saw the outline of an object in that pocket. I immediately thought it was a knife. Crap, this is not supposed to happen. I'm gonna die in here, I thought to myself. With a quivering voice, I told him very politely that I had to run the graveyard shift at work so that I could leave. And that was when his voice started to change. He angrily said, "No, you have to help me." I reached in my pocket and took out $30. That was the only money I had on me, and I just handed it to him. He took the money, but became angrier and shouted, "Hey, man, is this the only money you've brought?" He took another step and was much closer to me. But what happened next was a miracle. A loud sound came from a door that was shut outside the parking lot. He got distracted and turned his head around, and that is when I rushed to the elevators. It was a separate room which was only accessible to people who parked their cars there, because the door could only be opened with the parking receipt. I got into the elevator safely, but then I heard his loud footsteps behind me. I ran to my car, got in, and started it. I slowly pulled up to the gate, and it opened. Although I could see the guy charging at me when I tried to get out of the parking lot, it was too late for it. I stepped on the gas and drove away as fast as I could, and it only took me 15 minutes because I was using too much gas. To this day, I can't stop thinking about what would have happened if that door outside the parking lot wouldn't have made that loud noise.
My name is Cam. I'm 20 years old and this happened about 10 years ago. I used to live across the street from my friend Eric. One Saturday, my parents were going away for a night, but I didn't want to go. So we all arranged that I would sleep over at my friend Eric's house. We ordered pizza. I spent the night playing video games and watched a few movies. I'm not sure what time it was. It was pretty late, probably around 1 in the morning, I think. I was flicking through Eric's PlayStation games when Eric said, "I thought your parents were going away for the night." I said, "Yeah, they are. But there's someone in the house," Eric said. Confused, I got up and looked out the window where Eric was looking. And there was a light on. And someone was walking around in one of the rooms. Eric asked me who that could be. I told him I had no idea. My parents were out of town for the night. And we never had anyone come over by our house unannounced, especially at this time of night. Instead of waking Eric's parents or trying to call the police, we came up with this idea to sneak out and investigate who was in my house. Looking back, this was the dumbest thing I ever did, but we were just young boys. We grabbed a couple of flashlights, snuck out of Eric's back door, and headed over to my house. We didn't even think of how we would get in, but we didn't need to because the front door had been forced open. Upon entering the house, we saw there were damp, muddy footprints leading upstairs. I'm not sure if whoever was inside heard us, but we started following the footprints, and one of the lights turned off. At this point, I was getting afraid, and I told Eric we should just leave and tell someone. Eric proceeded upstairs, however. I didn't follow him up. I kept whispering to him, "Eric, come, let's go." He ignored me and continued going up. He walked into one of the rooms, and I lost sight of him. I then bravely went upstairs to see where he went. I walked into my bedroom, and a foul odor hit me in the face. I kept calling Eric's name, but he wouldn't answer. Then I heard something. It sounded like sobbing. I was scanning the room with my flashlight. In one of the corners of the room, I could see Eric's shoes. I raised the flashlight and I saw a disgusting, dirty hand that was covered in cuts and dirt covering Eric's mouth. The next thing I saw would haunt me for the rest of my life. I raised the flashlight once more, and the person covering Eric's mouth was a man who had a massive grin on his face, a vile beard and long, straight, black and gray, greasy hair. The way he was staring at me traumatized me. His eyes were wide and filled with rage. I screamed as loud as I could and ran out the bedroom. The man proceeded to chase me down the stairs and out the house. I thought I was going to die. Thankfully, when he ran outside, there was a police car pulling into the driveway. Someone had phoned the police when they saw flashlights and someone wandering around the house. The man saw the police and ran off. As he ran, there were things dropping out of his pocket, screwdrivers, a few other small tools, and one object that fell out. However, it wasn't a tool. It was a long, rusty, dirty blade. Thankfully, the man was found and arrested. Eric was unharmed, and so was I. The scary thing was the man didn't seem to have taken anything. So that suggests his interests were much, much more sinister. Eric and I remained best friends. but he nor I will ever forget this terrifying experience.
I'm a 16-year-old girl, and this took place in July of 2019. Me, my parents, and two sisters were having a family gathering at this lake where we all used to go. We hadn't been to this lake in a few years, so I was excited to be going back. Just to give you a general idea of the place, when you first pull into the path to head up to the lake, you have to drive for a few minutes, a very narrow path surrounded by woods. And you come to a fork in the path. One leads to a picnic area and the other leads to the lake. Then you continue up the path to the lake and after a few more minutes come across another fork. One side leads to one entrance to the lake and the other side leads to another entrance that's across the lake. After that, you still have to drive for a few more minutes until you get to the parking area, so it's pretty tedious. We'd already been to the lake for a few hours, and suddenly I got a headache. My mom gave me the car keys so I could go sit in the car with the air conditioning on. I took the keys and started to walk back to the car. The parking lot and the lake area were a little way off apart from each other. As I was approaching our car, I saw a man who was looking through the car windows. He was a skinny, old white man with shoulder-length gray hair, and he wore old clothes. I stopped walking and asked him, "Sir, what are you doing?" He slowly turned to me, stared at me for a moment, and then walked away. I thought it was weird, but I just ignored him that he might be just another visitor in this area. And I was totally wrong. I got into the driver's seat and locked the car. I turned the car on and tried to call my mom to tell her about the man. The man got inside one of the cars, but all the cars were empty.